Imagine being 15 years old, wrapped in heavy silk, believing you are being guided toward a wedding blessing. You expect music, prayers, and smiling faces. Instead, you are led into a sealed chamber deep inside the imperial palace. The doors close behind you, not to protect you, but to control you. The women inside are not relatives or guests. They are supervisors, instructors, and silent witnesses. A palace physician waits nearby, calm and distant, ready to record everything that happens next. You were told this was tradition, something honorable and necessary. What no one explained was that every movement, every breath, every moment of fear would be watched and remembered. Suddenly, the long months of forced silence make sense. So does your mother's face that morning? The way her hands shook while arranging your hair. The way she avoided your eyes, not because she did not care, but because meeting your gaze would have destroyed her. This ceremony is not about love. It is about obedience. This is not fiction or legend. For more than 600 years, the Ottoman Empire maintained a system so carefully designed and so psychologically harsh that even its enemies would not wish it on their own children. In 1623, a young princess was about to learn that imperial marriage had two faces, one shown to the world, and one hidden forever. For more than 6 centuries, from 1299 until 1922, the Ottoman Empire stretched across 3 continents like an endless sea. Its armies marched from the borders of Europe to the deep lands of Arabia. Cities fell, rulers bowed, and wealth flowed toward the center of power. After the fall of Constantinople in 1453, the city became Istanbul, the new heart of the empire. At its center stood Topkapi Palace, a place of gold, marble, and ceremony. From its halls, wars were planned, laws were written, and the fate of millions was decided. To the outside world, it appeared glorious and unstoppable. But behind its walls existed another reality. Beyond latticed windows and guarded corridors, hidden from public view, lived a world sealed off from time. This was the imperial harem. At its height, more than 800 women lived inside it. Every movement was watched. Every word was measured. A single mistake could lead to elevation or complete ruin. Nothing was accidental. Nothing was private. By the early 16th century, especially after powerful women like Fatma Sultan rose to influence, the harem became far more than a domestic space. It turned into a political battlefield where alliances were built and destroyed without swords. Most women there were concubines, captives taken from Europe, or bought from distant markets. They were stripped of their past identities but still carried hope. Some could rise in status, gain influence, even earn freedom. Strangely, many of these enslaved women had more possible futures than princesses born into royal blood. Because for a princess, power did not mean freedom. It meant, during the period historians later called the Sultanate of Women, figures like Fatma Sultan and Turhatis Sultan exercised enormous influence over the empire. From behind curtains and protocol, they guided councils, influenced wars, and controlled succession itself. Their authority reshaped the Ottoman world in lasting ways. Yet while these women wielded power, the princesses born into the dynasty lived under a very different destiny. They were not future rulers. They were guarantees. Living symbols used to secure loyalty, silence rivals, and reward obedience among powerful men. Their marriages were not personal choices but political tools, designed to hold the empire together. Into this system, Fatma Sultan was born in 1606. She was the daughter of Sultan Ahmed and Fatma Sultan, a woman strong enough to rule an empire from the shadows. Fatma grew up surrounded by gardens, scholars, and carefully guarded privilege. Tutors quickly recognized her intelligence. Chroniclers later praised her discipline and sharp mind. She studied law, history, astronomy, calligraphy, and theology. She spoke several languages fluently and debated confidently with learned men. She gazed at the night sky with deep curiosity, asking questions that unsettled her instructors. Curiosity, after all, was dangerous for a princess. But none of her talents mattered. From the moment she was born, her life no longer belonged to her. Her future had already been decided in quiet rooms she would never enter. She was not being raised to choose a path, she was being prepared to fulfill one. Love was never part of the plan. Happiness was irrelevant. When the empire required it, she would be given in marriage. Her body would serve diplomacy. Her obedience would seal alliances. No matter how brilliant or gifted she was, Her fate was fixed long before she could understand what fate truly meant. When the time came, the decision was made without her voice ever being invited into the room. The man chosen for Fatma Sultan was Kara Mustafa Pasha, a senior commander shaped by years of brutal warfare and hardened by loyalty to the state. He was nearly 20 years older than her, experienced, ambitious, and fully aware of what such a marriage meant. For him, the union promised security, promotion, and direct access to imperial power. It was a calculated reward. For Fatma, still a child in many ways, it marked the end of choice altogether. She was no longer a daughter. She was a political instrument, placed carefully to strengthen the empire. 3 months before the wedding, the true ordeal began. What followed was known as a sacred preparation, reserved only for imperial princesses. It had no equal anywhere else in the world. This was not teaching, it was conditioning. A system refined over generations to strip royal daughters of pride, independence, and identity, replacing them with complete submission. The woman appointed to oversee this process was Gulnur Hatun, an elderly matron of the harem who had supervised many such preparations before. She understood exactly how long it took to break a princess. She had seen it happen again and again. Under Gulnur Hatun's unyielding supervision, Fatma was led into the bridal chamber. The room was lined with dark panels and heavy carpets, but nothing inside was meant for comfort. Every object carried symbolic meaning. Every angle reminded the girl of her purpose. From early morning until midday, day after day, Fatma was forced to rehearse rituals of obedience. There were many distinct forms of bowing, each with a specific use. How to greet her husband, how to serve him, how to kneel, how to lie still, how to wait in silence. Even walking was no longer natural. Each step was measured precisely. Her head had to remain lowered at an exact angle. Her hands were never allowed to rise above her heart. With every correction, the memory of who she had been faded further, replaced by the shape of what the empire demanded she become. Movement was only the beginning. Speech soon became the harshest discipline of all. Fatma's language was stripped down to a narrow list of approved words. Simple phrases of gratitude, apology, acceptance, and submission. Nothing more. Any attempt to speak freely, any change in tone, any question asked without permission was punished immediately. She was made to fast until weakness set in. She was locked alone in cold, damp rooms meant for reflection. At times she was shamed publicly before other women of the court. Obedience was never assumed. It was tested again and again until resistance became too costly to attempt. At regular intervals, Fatma was brought before a gathering of senior women of the harem, overseen by her own mother, Fatma Sultan. There, her behavior was examined as if it were a form of currency. Her posture, her silence, her willingness to submit were measured and judged. Approval meant survival. Failure meant further punishment. The presence of her mother made the process even more devastating. Love existed, but it was powerless against the machinery of empire. Hidden beneath the palace, in underground chambers few ever entered, the most disturbing preparations began. Exact copies of bridal rooms had been built below ground. Inside them stood lifelike figures crafted by foreign artisans, designed with unsettling accuracy. Before stern instructors, Fatma was forced to rehearse gestures and acts no girl her age should have been made to understand. Every reaction was recorded. Fear led to more sessions. Tears brought repetition. Resistance resulted in harsher conditioning. Slowly, carefully, the curious child was reshaped into a silent body trained to obey. The girl who once looked to the stars was no longer encouraged to think. She was being taught only how to endure. The training did not end with silence and rehearsal. It deepened into endurance. Any sign of resistance, a raised chin, a delayed bow, even a sigh that lingered too long was punished. Fatma was forced into prolonged fasting until her body weakened and her thoughts slowed. She was made to repeat exhausting physical exercises meant not to strengthen her, but to drain her. At times, she was confined in cold, airless rooms where time lost meaning. These punishments were not hidden. They were carried out in front of the female court so that humiliation would do its work. The message was clear. Even royal blood offered no protection. Alongside physical control came mental reshaping. Fatma was ordered to memorize long passages from Ottoman and Persian writings that praised obedience, sacrifice, and the complete surrender of self as virtues. These texts filled her days and nights. She recited them aloud before concubines and eunuchs who acted as judges, listening not for understanding but for submission. The girl who once spoke of law, poetry, and the movement of stars now repeated words designed to erase her will. Thought itself became dangerous. Prayer was turned into another tool. 5 times each day, at exact hours, Fatma was required to perform specially written prayers approved by palace scholars. These were not moments of personal faith. They were carefully crafted exercises meant to break individuality and redirect devotion toward her future husband. Even worship was no longer her own. Her body learned obedience through ritual, her mind through repetition. Twice each week, the humiliation grew deeper. Before the entire female court, Fatma was required to serve her own father's favored concubines. She washed them, dressed them, fed them, and prepared them for their nights with the Sultan. This ritual was intentional. It was meant to crush the last fragments of pride, to teach her that even women without royal blood stood above her. Witnesses later recorded that Fatma often broke down in quiet sobs while fastening garments, her hands shaking as the court watched in silence. By then, the empire's work was nearly complete. 1 week before the wedding, the control tightened even further. Fatma was moved to the bride's pavilion, an isolated structure sealed from outside sound and human contact. Inside, every detail of her existence was regulated. Her meals were measured and timed, made from specific foods believed to weaken resistance and soften the body. Her baths were supervised daily, using perfumed oils chosen to calm the nerves and dull awareness. Nothing was left to chance, even rest was monitored. Sleep came only when allowed. The walls of the pavilion were covered with tapestries showing ideal wives, silent, obedient, devoted, and endlessly fertile. Each image carried the same message. This is what you must become. Mirrors were placed throughout the rooms, forcing Fatma to watch herself constantly, as if her own reflection had become another guard. By this point she understood the truth fully. Her body no longer belonged to her. Her voice had been reduced to fragments. Even her thoughts felt unsafe. This final phase was called inner discipline. It was once meant for spiritual focus, but here it was reshaped into something darker. Fatma was trained to monitor herself, to correct her own thoughts before anyone else could. Fear no longer came only from outside, it lived inside her. In isolation she realized what had been done to her piece by piece. The curious, intelligent girl who once studied the sky had been erased. What remained was a quiet, obedient figure prepared to complete the role assigned to her. And the empire was not finished yet. The wedding day was approaching, and what awaited her then would seal everything this preparation had begun. The wedding day arrived on March 15, 1623. From the first light of dawn, Istanbul moved like a city celebrating victory. Music echoed through the streets. Processions wound between mosques and markets. Inside the palace, tables overflowed with gold dishes, and guests filled the halls with laughter. To the public, it looked like a celebration blessed by heaven. To Fatma, it was a sentence being carried out. Palace physicians watched her closely, noting trembling hands, cold sweats, shallow breathing, and long moments where her eyes seemed unfocused. What the crowd saw as splendor was, for her, pure terror. When the final guests withdrew, Fatma was escorted toward the inner pavilion built deep within the gardens. Every corridor, every step had been designed to strip her of control. Ritual baths followed, lasting hours meant to weaken the body and dull resistance. She was dressed in a magnificent gown that hid restraints beneath its beauty. While she was prepared for surrender, her husband was prepared for dominance. By the time she reached the final chamber, Fatma's strength was gone. Her mind withdrew as a last form of survival. Records later described a complete collapse. Her body shook, her voice faded, her spirit retreated. After that night, she was never the same. She spoke little, ate less, and lived in constant fear. Doctors called it a known condition among imperial princesses. Today we would call it lasting trauma. Fatma lived many years after, present in body but absent in spirit. Her story was not unique. Palace records reveal many princesses endured similar fates, their lives erased quietly. Her life exposes a painful truth. Power does not always protect those closest to it. Sometimes it destroys them first. And it leaves us asking how many more stories like hers remain hidden, waiting to be uncovered.